Now, there were obviously things that were going on like farming, but here it is after the flood, so we got to get started again. And so he plants a vineyard. He drank the wine, became drunk, and uncovered himself inside his tent. That short statement, pow, is a really big deal. Why? Well, who was selected by God as the most righteous person on earth, the one who was going to be in the ark? He was the one that was the moral standby for the whole planet. And so his sons had seen this example of him being a preacher of righteousness. They have seen him follow God in doing a task like building this ark and everything that everybody ridiculed and made fun of him for doing it. And he had stood up to do what was right. And here, for whatever reason, the scripture doesn't tell us. There are people who speculate about the fact that after the flood, we might have had a different kind of yeast kind of thing happening in the world than we had had before. And so new wine, grape juice, might have stayed like grape juice a long, long time. And so he might not have been expecting this, and yet, I don't know if y'all know that. There's a big thing going on these days. How many of you had your shot of kombucha today? Some of you are going, what? There are a lot of people who are making fermented drinks, and no, I'm not talking about moonshine. But there's yeast in the air everywhere. I mean, you can make dough and put it out, and you think you got to put yeast in it. If you leave it out, it finds yeast. I'm learning these things at my house. And so what might have been different in the world and the atmosphere might have caught him off guard, or it just might have been that he just had a moral lapse. You see, the scripture doesn't outright condemn in every situation the idea of consuming some alcohol, but it outright condemns drunkenness. And it discourages drinking. And so here he finds himself in this situation. Now, I'm not much on information about, what happens when people when they're drunk by personal experience. God has spared me that thing. I spent all my time when we were doing things we weren't supposed to do. I spent my time chasing girls. And I wasn't very successful until finally Liz came along and I was blessed. But the reality is I'm told that people get hot. That the alcohol in their system causes them to get hot. And their judgment is not really good anymore. So apparently Noah just decided it was a good time to strip off. And he did. Noah, notice in this passage, we hear nothing about Mrs. Noah. There is no Mrs. Noah coming along to take care of the situation. She's been on the ark, but we don't see her. That's another thing, guys, we need to remember. We need to be very thankful to God for the one that He has put in our life. If we are married men, that keeps an eye on us and helps us as our helpmate and our one flesh partner, because she could have possibly kept him out of a situation like this had she been there. We don't know. As we go on to verse 22, here's our story. Ham, the youngest son, and what do we say about him again? Red flag. The father of Canaan saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, commentators say he saw his father and it wasn't like, ooh, Dad. It was like, ooh, I can't wait to go find my brother. Hey, guys, come and look. Dad's stripped off naked drunk. Celebrating something that would be to Noah's shame. And so when you look at the scripture, the Ten Commandments that were going to be coming much further down the line in the time of Moses, when the scripture says, honor your father and mother that your days might be long on the earth, the Lord has given you. Here is an example of how that comes to us. Here is an example where Ham does not honor his father here is an example where Shem and Japheth do. They take a garment, they laid it upon their shoulders, walked backwards, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, so they did not see their father's nakedness. Now, this was not because he was ugly, okay? This was because of respect. And still in our culture today, there's nothing in the scripture that indicates that there's ever going to be the intention of Earth being a nudist colony. There's no plan for that. Because of our sin nature, God knows that the world would be even more filled with lust and perversion and sexual immorality. And so He has called us to be modest and to do those kinds of things. And so these two sons had taken care of that sort of thing for their father. Notice in verse 24, he wakes up. And we don't know exactly how he found out everything of the circumstances, but in verse 25 he says, "Cursed be Canaan." Whoa, time out. Cursed be Canaan? Who did this to him? Ham. And so you learn something about the culture in the Old Testament. When you see, here's a situation where David is king, and he's being told by God that if, as you follow me and your sons follow me, that there will always be one of your children on the throne. That a blessing on future generations is something that was incredible. And there are times Abraham is told, you're going to be made a great nation. And this is about God of the nation. You're going to be made a great nation. And so as you are in this situation, look to your people becoming a great nation and a blessing. But here's the situation where God, through Noah, talks about the coming of in the table of nations, those who are going to follow Ham. His sons, his grandsons, and the things that are going to happen. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the servant of the servants. He shall be to his brother." She also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Verse 27, "May God enlarge Japheth." Let's see, did we lose 27? There we go. "And let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Now, there are a lot of people who wonder exactly what all of this means, because if you go back and you look at the table of nations, you don't necessarily see where servanthood of one whole group of people turned out to be something to another one of the groups listed in this list, in the table of nations. And so, most of the commentators are basically saying at this point is that Japheth was sort of the spiritual one, the one where you would see all the things that God would do along the line. Shem was from the people groups that have made incredible intellectual developments into the world. But the descendants of Ham are more from regions and areas that gave us government structures, servanthood things, that lifted up the ability for the world to be more intellectual and godly. And so their servanthood role was to create the infrastructure for the rest of the things to happen. And that's really the best we can do with that passage right now to understand how that servanthood role was. It was a stewardship. And in verse 28 it says, "Noah lived 350 years after the flood. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died." Why do they always say that? Because when God told Adam and Eve, "You're free to eat the fruit as much as you want of anything here. Don't eat the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, because as soon as you do, you what? You die." So this is a reminder that sin is the cause of death. Sin is the cause of physical death. Ultimately, it is the cause of spiritual death immediately, as soon as a person in their heart turns away from God. And so as we think about all of the things that go with this and the nations that come from this, you can see these, for example, in Genesis 10:5. If you're taking notes on your sermon notes page, it talks about the nations that were from each one of these brothers. Nations that were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, and in their nations. In Genesis 10:20, these are the sons of Ham according to their families, according to their languages, by their lands, and by their nations. Genesis 10:31, these are the sons of Shem according to their families, according to their languages, by their lands, according to their nations. So God, in his sovereign will and planned for there to be different groups of people, and we're going to see next week, Lord willing, as we get to the Tower of Babel, where all of the language plays such a crucial role when communication becomes such an issue in the world. And so, languages, lands, nations. Now, the sons of Japheth, they have a special role. And there's a funny little dotted picture of this next. There it is. That is just an example of 10 little nations. I know you can't see it, but at the top is Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth. And then he goes down to list all the different ones and where they came from. And so as you see, Ham is in the middle. From that, you wind up with Babylonia, Syria, Egypt, all of the major nations and people groups of that sense we look at as major world governments. And so you say, well, that doesn't look like a curse so much because, I mean, those are major world nations in history. Some of them still in existence today. And yet, as you look at those, all of those nations, ultimately God uses them simply to relate to his own people, Israel. If they're misbehaving, he'll bring one of those nations in to correct them. If they need a place to be protected, he may take his people and put them in that land, but he doesn't leave them in that land. He brings them back out to their place. And so this role for Ham and for Canaan and the destruction ultimately of that people is really interesting to look at. What different contributions that we have, contributions that have been made. The descendants of Ham being Cush, his son Nimrod. How many of y'all remember the passages about Nimrod being a great hunter and that sort of thing? He's actually the founder of Babylonia and Assyria. And so what turned out to be enormous nations on their own right, very ungodly, but some of them very far advanced in some of their scientific things. It all comes from that people group. When you talk about God's promises, one of the main ones that you're going to ultimately see then comes to Abraham. And in the God of the nations, God promises to make Abraham's family into a great nation. As a result of all the nations will be blessed by his family. This is the line that ultimately is going to come down to produce Jesus, the Messiah. So God's work as God of the nations wasn't a random thing. He knew what was going on. He knew how he was going to work through all of the peoples and times. Even as all of these millions and billions of people in history are going to be operating in their free will, God is going to cause all of these things to work for his purpose, and his sovereign will be accomplished. Amen. So what are we saying today? We're saying, as you children are saying, what does this sermon mean? How do I apply this, right? I'm either going to be cooperating and participating in what God is doing, or I'm going to be in opposition to it either by ignoring it or by doing the opposite. So do I want to have a life of blessing because I'm walking with God and I'm serving Him and I'm loving Him and realizing His gracious love to me? That He actually sent His Son, His one and only Son, to die on the cross for me. He who had no sin became sin on my behalf that I might have the righteousness, I might be the righteousness of God. And so in this reality, there's still just one or the other choice. You're either for Him or against Him, with Him or in opposition. And you're saying, no, I'm just going to be amoral. I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to be one or the other. Then you're on the other side. You've either got to choose and desire the things of God because He draws you to and you respond to it, or you're not with Him. So Jesus said, with me or against me. There was no amoral place in the So as we talk about this blessing, this seed that is to come, we see that as Jesus comes and does the work of redemption and brings salvation, regardless of our sin, He can save anyone who will respond to His call to salvation. We see Jesus as He prepares to go back to heaven to be our mediator before God, to pray and intercede on our behalf, giving these instructions in Acts chapter 1, beginning in verse 7. Yeah, we can go. There you go. He said to them, "It is not for you to know times or epochs which the Father has fixed by His own authority." Remember we said that from creation to the flood, that was like an epoch, a time period. And then we've had others that have gone on since. We have this time that's going to come when church history is started. That's a spiritual epoch for us. And there's going to